Hello, good morning. It's morning while I'm here doing this. It's like 9ish, 8:45ish. Okay, in the middle of a chapter or somewhere. It's part 2. Have you been listening at the door, Edgar? Asked the mistress in a tone particularly calculated to provoke her husband, implying both carelessness and contempt of his irritation. Heathcliff, who had raised his eyes at the former's speech, gave a sneering laugh at the latter, on purpose, it seemed, to draw Mr. Linton's attention to him. He succeeded, but Edgar did not mean to entertain him with any high flights of passion. "I've been so far forbearing with you, sir," he said quietly, "not that I was ignorant of your miserable, degraded character, but I felt you were only partly responsible for that. In Catherine wishing to keep up your acquaintance, I acquiesced foolishly. Your presence is a moral poison that would contaminate the most virtuous. For that cause, and to prevent worse consequences, I shall deny you hereafter admission into this house, and give notice now that I require your instant departure. 3 minutes' delay will render it involuntary and ignominious. Anyway. Heathcliff measured the height and breadth of the speaker with an eye full of derision. "Cathy, this lamb of yours threatens like a bull," he said. "It is in danger of splitting its skull against my knuckles. By God, Mr. Linton, I'm mortally sorry that you are not worth knocking down." My master glanced towards the passage and signed me to fetch the men. He had no intention of hazarding a personal encounter. I obeyed the hint, but Mrs. Linton, suspecting something, followed, and when I attempted to call them, she pulled me back, slammed the door to, and locked it. "Fair means," she said, in answer to her husband's look of angry surprise. "If you have not courage to attack him, make an apology, or allow yourself to be beaten. It will correct you of feigning more valor than you possess. No, I'll swallow the key before you shall get in. I'm delightfully rewarded for my kindness to each. After constant indulgence of one's weak nature and the other's bad one, I earned for thanks 2 samples of blind ingratitude, stupid to absurdity. Edgar, I was defending you and yours, and I wish Heathcliff may flog you sick for daring to think an evil thought of me." It did not need the medium of a flogging to produce that effect on the master. He tried to wrest the key from Catherine's grasp, and for safety she flung it into the hottest part of the fire, whereupon Mr. Edgar was taken with a nervous trembling, and his countenance grew deadly pale. For his life he could not avert that access of emotion. Mingled anguish and humiliation overcame him completely. He leant on the back of a chair and covered his face. "Oh, heavens! In old days this would win you knighthood," exclaimed Mrs. Linton. "We are vanquished, we are vanquished. Heathcliff would as soon lift a finger at you as the king would march his army against a colony of mice. Cheer up, you shan't be hurt. Your type is not a lamb, it's a sucking leveret." "I wish you joy of the milk-blooded coward, Cathy," said her friend. "I compliment you on your taste, and that is the slavering, shearing thing you prefer to me. I would not strike him with my fist, but I'd kick him with my foot and experience considerable satisfaction. Is he weeping, or is he going to faint for fear?" The fellow approached and gave the chair on which Linton rested a push. He'd better have kept his distance. My master quickly sprang erect and struck him full on the throat, a blow that would have leveled a slighter man. It took his breath for a minute, and while he choked, Mr. Linton walked out by the back door into the yard, and from thence to the front entrance. "There, you've done with coming here," cried Catherine. "Get away now. He'll return with a brace of pistols and half a dozen assistants. If he did overhear us, of course, he'd never forgive you. You've played me an ill turn, Heathcliff, but go, make haste. I'd rather see Edgar at bay than you. Do you suppose I'm going with that blow burning in my gullet? He thundered. By hell, no. I'll crush his ribs in like a rotten hazelnut before I cross the threshold. If I don't floor him now, I shall murder him sometime, so as you value his existence, let me get at him. He is not coming, I interposed, framing a bit of a lie. There's the coachman and the two gardeners. You'll surely not wait to be thrust into the road by them. Each has a bludgeon, and master will very likely be watching from the parlor windows to see that they fulfill his orders. The gardeners and coachmen were there, but Linton was with them. They had already entered the court. Heathcliff, on second thought, resolved to avoid a struggle against three underlings. He seized the poker, smashed the lock from the inner door, and made his escape as they tramped in. Mrs. Linton, who was very much excited, bade me accompany her upstairs. She did not know my share in contributing to the disturbance, and I was anxious to keep her in ignorance. Get a little coffee. Only got a little in here. But more made up in the fridge. Yay! I'm nearly distracted. Distracted, Nellie, she exclaimed, throwing herself on the sofa. 1,000 Smith's hammers are beating in my head. Tell Isabella to shun me. This uproar is owing to her. And should she or anyone else aggravate my anger at present, I shall get wild. And Nellie, say to Edgar, if you see him again tonight, that I'm in danger of being seriously ill. I wish it may prove true. He has startled and distressed me shockingly. I want to frighten him. Besides, he might come and begin a string of abuse or complainings. I'm certain I should recriminate, and God knows where we will end. Will you do so, my good Nellie? You are aware that I am no way blamable in this matter. What possessed him to turn listener? Heathcliff's talk was outrageous after you left us, but I could soon have diverted him from Isabella, and the rest meant nothing. Now all is dashed wrong by the fool's craving to hear evil of self. That haunts some people like a demon. Had Edgar never gathered our conversation, he would never have been the worse for it. Really, when he opened on me in that unreasonable tone of displeasure, after I had scolded Heathcliff that I was hoarse for him, I did not care hardly what they did to each other, especially as I felt that, however the scene closed, we should all be driven asunder for nobody knows how long. Well, if I cannot keep Heathcliff for my friend, if Edgar will be mean and jealous, I'll try to break their hearts by breaking my own. That will be a prompt way of finishing all when I am pushed to extremity. But it's a deed to be reserved for a forlorn hope. I'd not take Linton by surprise with it. To this point he has been discreet in dreading to provoke me. You must represent the peril of quitting that policy, and remind him of my passionate temper, verging when kindled on frenzy. Verging. Gosh. Vergling. I wish you could dismiss the apathy out of your countenance and look rather more anxious about me. The stolidity with which I received these instructions was no doubt rather exasperating, for they were delivered in perfect sincerity. But I believed a person who could plan the turning of her fits of passion to account beforehand might, by exerting her will, manage to control herself tolerably, even while under their influence. And I did not wish to frighten her husband, as she said, and multiply his annoyances for the purpose of serving her selfishness. Therefore, I said nothing when I met the master coming towards the parlor, but I took the liberty of turning back to listen whether they would resume their quarrel together. He began to speak first. "Remain where you are, Catherine," he said, without any anger in his voice, but with much sorrow, despondency. "I shall not stay. I am neither come to wrangle nor be reconciled. But I wish just to learn whether after this evening's events you intend to continue your intimacy with—" "Oh, for mercy's sake," interrupted the mistress, stamping her foot, "for mercy's sake, let us hear no more of it now. Your cold blood cannot be worked into a fever. Your veins are full of ice water, but mine are boiling, and the sight of such chillness makes them dance. To get rid of me, answer my question," persevered Mr. Linton. "You must answer it, and that violence does not alarm me. I have found that you can be as stoical as anyone when you please. Will you give up Heathcliff hereafter, or will you give up me? It is impossible for you to be my friend and his at the same time, and I absolutely require to know which you would choose." "I require to be let alone," explained Catherine furiously. "I demand it. Don't you see I can scarcely stand? Edgar, you leave me." She rang the bell till it broke with a twang. I entered leisurely. It was enough to try the temper of a saint, such senseless, wicked rages. There she lay, dashing her head against the arm of the sofa and grinding her teeth so that you might fancy she was going to crash them to splinters. Mr. Linton stood looking at her in sudden compunction and fear. He told me to fetch some water. She had no breath for speaking. I brought a glassful, and as she would not drink, I sprinkled it on her face. In a few seconds she stretched herself out stiff and turned up her eyes, while her cheeks, at once blanched and livid, assumed the aspect of death. Linton looked terrified. "There is nothing in the world the matter," I whispered. I did not want him to yield, though I could not help being afraid in my heart. "She has blood on her lips," he said, shuddering. "Never mind," I answered tartly. I told him how she had resolved, previously to his coming, on exhibiting a full fit of frenzy. I incautiously gave the account aloud, and she heard me, for she started up, her hair flying over her shoulders, her eyes flashing, the muscles of her neck and arms standing out preternaturally. I made up my mind for broken bones at least, but she only glared about for an instant, and then rushed from the room. The master directed me to follow. I did, to her chamber door. She hindered me from going further by securing it against me. As she never offered to descend to breakfast next morning, I went to ask whether she would have some carried up. "No," she replied peremptorily. The same question was repeated at dinner and tea, and again on the morrow after, and received the same answer. Mr. Linton, on his part, spent his time in the library and did not inquire concerning his wife's occupations. Isabella and he had had an hour's interview, during which he tried to elicit from her some sentiment of proper horror for Heathcliff's advances, but he could make nothing of her evasive replies, and was obliged to close the examination unsatisfactorily, adding, however, a solemn warning that if she were so insane as to encourage that worthless suitor, it would dissolve all bonds of relationship between herself and him. And then we'll be at chapter 12. Whew! It's a workout. And I'm sorry, I'm sure I slay a lot of those words. Thought I had a fairly decent vocabulary until you read the old classics. Boy, they were some smart folk. Okay, we'll see you later. Today's Friday, live at 5, Tea with Granny D. And it's also the morning for Krista, the Secret Yarnery. I love to go there when she comes on. It's 10 o'clock my time, so it'll be here before I know it. I'm going to try to get Ann in before that time. Yeah, I got plenty of time. See you later. Love you bunches. Be sweet. Don't be ugly. There's our sign. Oh, and here is one of the yarns I got for $1 yesterday. Got 10 of them. All they had. I was a hoarder. But, like I said, I'm going to put a couple in the 2K, or at least one. And I got lots of stuff I'm going to put in the 2K. God, I still got to get 200 and some. So any help y'all can do for me, I appreciate it. But there's going to be good stuff in there. But I want to start sending out random happy mails. I've got to go get stitch markers. I'm going to try. Today's adulting day to pay the bills, and then I hope to get my honey over there and work on stitch markers. Y'all pray that I do that. Okay, see you later. Bye-bye.